the royal baby the world celebrated never existed as we were told? It's a question so bold, so unsettling, that even saying it aloud feels dangerous. Because in the royal world, every photo, every announcement, every perfectly crafted press release is designed to keep the illusion alive. The illusion of stability. The illusion of perfection. The illusion that every royal secret has already been revealed. But what if one of the biggest secrets was hiding in plain sight all along? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Picture this: a live television broadcast, bright lights, smiling hosts, the usual harmless royal chatter. And then, out of nowhere, Princess Eugenie, beloved granddaughter of Queen Elizabeth II, leans forward, chuckles nervously, and asks a question that freezes the room. The laughter fades, the smiles tighten, and Meghan Markle's expression, usually so carefully composed, flickers, just for a second. A split second of panic. The clip goes viral within minutes. The internet explodes. What did Eugenie just say? What did Meghan's reaction mean? Was it an inside joke, or something else entirely? No one knew it then. But that single moment would spark one of the strangest, most controversial royal mysteries of the decade. Because Princess Eugenie didn't just ask a casual question. She touched a nerve. A nerve that, according to insiders, Meghan Markle had fought for years to keep hidden. And that question, innocent as it sounded, might have exposed the most delicate secret of the Sussex brand, the true story of Lilibet Diana. Why does this matter now? Because the cracks are showing again. And for the first time, people inside and outside the palace are beginning to whisper the same dangerous phrase. What if Eugenie wasn't joking? Let's rewind. Ever since Prince Harry and Meghan Markle stepped away from royal life in 2020, their every move has been scrutinized. The interviews, the lawsuits, the podcasts, the documentaries. The world watched as they built their new lives in California, far from Buckingham Palace, but not far from controversy. Through it all, there was one storyline that seemed untouchable: their role as parents. When their daughter, Lilibet Diana, was born, it was supposed to be the ultimate redemption arc. A little girl named after the Queen herself and Harry's late mother, Princess Diana. The symbolism was perfect, too perfect. And from the moment her name was announced, the royal PR machine kicked into overdrive. But something was off. Unlike every other royal birth, there were no hospital photos. No proud father walking out holding the baby. No details about where or when exactly the birth took place. Just a polished statement, a few words from friends, and then silence. Months later, a single photo appeared. One that seemed to raise more questions than it answered. Lighting inconsistencies, background confusion. Even metadata experts began pointing out strange anomalies. But Meghan's team brushed it all aside. Privacy, they said. Respect the family's boundaries. And for a while, people did. Until that live interview. It wasn't a high-profile royal documentary or a formal event. It was supposed to be casual, lighthearted. Eugenie discussing motherhood, the next generation of royals, and the joys of family life. Meghan, tuning in remotely, looked relaxed at first, until Eugenie smiled and said something that stopped the conversation cold. So, when will we get to meet little Lilibet properly? I feel like no one's actually seen her yet. A harmless question, right? Except it wasn't. The host laughed awkwardly. Meghan's expression froze. For a brief second, her eyes darted down and away. Her smile returned, but it didn't reach her eyes. The air felt heavy. The kind of tension that only happens when someone accidentally steps on a secret. The camera cut quickly, but the damage was done. Viewers noticed. Screenshots flooded social media. Analysts dissected Meghan's micro-expressions, comparing them to footage from her previous interviews. That's fear, one body language expert tweeted. That's not surprise. That's panic. And that's where our story truly begins. Why did that one question hit so hard? Why did Meghan look terrified? And why did the Sussex's PR team move so fast to bury the clip that it mysteriously disappeared from the show's archives within 24 hours? In the days that followed, headlines exploded. Awkward moment between Meghan and Eugenie sparked speculation. Palace sources claimed tension brewing between cousins. Eugenie's on-air gaffe, was it intentional? But there was something different about this one. Usually, when rumors about Meghan appear, her team fights back fast. Press statements, lawyers, online supporters. This time, nothing. Total silence. Which, of course, only made the whispers grow louder. People started digging. Timelines. Photos. Official birth certificates. Hospital records. Something didn't add up. Each discrepancy, on its own, seemed harmless. Together, they painted a far stranger picture. And yet, this wasn't just about paperwork. It was about perception. Because Meghan Markle had built her post-royal identity on being transparent, authentic, emotionally honest. But when Eugenie asked about Lilibet, that image cracked, just enough for people to see the fear underneath. Was Eugenie's question truly accidental? Or was it something else, a royal cousin trying to send a message, maybe even a warning? Let's be honest. In the royal world, nothing happens by accident. Every public word is vetted. Every question is rehearsed. So when a family member says something off-script, it's rarely off-script at all. That's what made this so dangerous. Because if Eugenie really knew something, if she suspected a gap between the official story and the truth, then her comment wasn't a slip. It was a strike. A carefully timed reminder that Meghan's narrative wasn't as airtight as she believed. And that's where the panic began. Sources close to the Sussexes claimed Meghan immediately called her PR advisors after the show. Emails, late-night messages, quiet phone calls to networks, an all-out effort to contain what she saw as a potential disaster. The video was quietly removed, labeled as a technical issue. But by then, it was too late. The internet never forgets. Clips reappeared on Reddit, TikTok, even foreign news channels. Did Princess Eugenie just expose Meghan Markle? One headline asked. Another simply said, "Where is Lilibet?" The question was out there, and it wouldn't go away. Now, before you jump to conclusions, let's be clear. This isn't about conspiracy. It's about contradictions. The kind that powerful people hate to explain. Because the truth doesn't always vanish when you hide it. Sometimes, it just waits for the wrong person to ask the right question. And Eugenie, perhaps unknowingly, asked it. For Meghan, this was a nightmare. For the royal establishment, it was worse. Because if one member of the family started questioning the narrative, others might too. And when royal secrets start unraveling, they don't stop neatly, they explode. That's why what happened next matters so much. Because in the weeks following the broadcast, strange things began happening. Meghan's public appearances suddenly dropped. Her team released a new photo, supposedly of Lilibet, but critics noticed the timing. The lighting didn't match the season. The shadows didn't align. The child's features sparked online debates. Too old, too young, maybe even digitally altered. And then, just as people began to calm down, another twist hit. A veteran royal photographer spoke anonymously to a British tabloid, claiming he had never once been contacted to shoot official portraits of Lilibet Diana. That statement, small, almost unnoticeable in print, ignited another firestorm online. If not him, then who? Who photographed the Queen with her namesake great-granddaughter during that private meeting in Windsor? Why was there no official confirmation, no press pool, no footage, no traceable source image? The contradictions piled up, the questions multiplied, and the silence from Meghan's camp grew deafening. Even palace insiders began whispering that something felt off, not necessarily scandalous, but different. The energy around it was odd, one source allegedly said. Usually there's celebration. This time, there was distance. And that brings us back to Eugenie. She wasn't just another royal cousin. She was one of Harry's closest allies during the royal split. She visited them in California. She defended them in private. So when she asked that question, live, unfiltered, it carried more weight than anyone else's could. It wasn't the press. It wasn't critics. It was family. And family, as the royals know better than anyone, can be far more dangerous than strangers. So the real question isn't whether Eugenie slipped up. It's whether she meant to. Because sometimes the sharpest cuts come disguised as kindness. Imagine being Meghan in that moment. Sitting under bright studio lights, millions watching, a question you didn't expect piercing through your rehearsed composure. The fear of losing control, again. You can almost hear her thoughts. Keep smiling. Don't flinch. Don't give them anything. But she already had. The panic, that fleeting flicker across her face, was all it took. 1 second of emotion in a lifetime of performance. And that's why this story exploded. Because audiences can sense authenticity, and they can sense when someone's hiding something. For Meghan, every appearance is a chess move. Every silence, a calculation. But in that one unscripted second, she lost control of the board. And if Eugenie's question was the first move in a much bigger royal game, then what happened next would reveal just how far Meghan was willing to go to keep her image intact. Because the real storm didn't happen on TV. It happened after, behind closed doors, among family members who had already lost trust in one another, in whispered calls from palace aides who knew too much, in carefully timed leaks to journalists hungry for blood. And when the truth began to surface, it wasn't just about a baby. It was about power, manipulation, and the terrifying fragility of a brand built on image. So as the world laughed, speculated, and scrolled through memes, Meghan Markle was reportedly panicking. Not just about Eugenie's question, but about what it could lead to. What if one casual question on live television wasn't a mistake, but a message? That's where we begin, with the interview that was supposed to be harmless. It wasn't a royal summit, not a state occasion, not even a major network event. It was a morning chat show, the kind of soft, cozy format where hosts giggle over baby photos, trade anecdotes, and sip tea from branded mugs. Nothing explosive ever happens there. Nothing until that day. The segment had been billed as the modern royals, family, friendship, and the future. A simple conversation. Meghan Markle appeared via video from California, her backdrop carefully curated, soft lighting, floral arrangement, the usual calm, controlled aesthetic. Princess Eugenie was in the London studio, glowing, charming, confident. Two women, two continents, one shared past. The producers were thrilled. Ratings gold. They were selling relatability. See, the royals are just like us. But reality had other plans. The show began smoothly. Eugenie talked about motherhood, about her son August, about balance and new beginnings. Meghan smiled, nodded, laughed in all the right places. The atmosphere was warm, even affectionate. But beneath the surface, there was a tension the cameras couldn't hide, the kind that only family rifts can create. The hosts, of course, sensed it. And then one of them leaned forward with the question that would trigger everything. So, ladies, your children are growing up fast. Eugenie, August must be keeping you busy. Meghan, little Lilibet must be at that wonderful stage. What's she like these days? It was a softball question. Meghan handled it with a polished smile, saying something about Lilibet being curious and spirited, the perfect PR-friendly answer. But then, as the laughter faded, Eugenie tilted her head and added one more line. I feel like no one's really seen her yet, she said lightly, smiling as if it were a joke. When will we get to meet her properly? The studio went silent. Even the host blinked, unsure if he should laugh or move on. Meghan froze, not visibly enough for the average viewer, but perceptibly enough for anyone who knew her. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes did something, a tiny flick downward, then back up, the classic micro-expression of alarm. You could almost hear the hum of the studio lights. It lasted 2 seconds, maybe 3, but in those seconds, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Meghan recovered quickly, saying something vague about protecting the children's privacy. She laughed softly, tried to pivot back to the topic of motherhood challenges. But the moment had already landed, and online, nothing gets past the viewers. Clips began circulating within minutes. Zoomed-in replays, slow-motion analysis, frame-by-frame comparisons. Look at her face, one TikTok user captioned. She wasn't expecting that question. Another video racked up hundreds of thousands of views with the caption, "Why does Meghan look terrified when Eugenie mentions Lilibet?" By the end of the day, the hashtag where is Lilibet was trending in the UK, the US, and Canada. It sounds ridiculous now, doesn't it? That a single remark could ignite a global debate. But this wasn't just about the question. It was about what came after, the reaction, the silence, and the subtle, frantic cleanup that followed. Because when producers tried to replay the interview later that evening, the segment was gone. Cut from reruns. Removed from the network's online archive. The official explanation? Technical issue. Technical issue. Viewers didn't buy it for a second. They started saving screen recordings, sharing them on forums, comparing versions. And suddenly, something trivial turned into something suspicious. Because in the modern world, the harder you try to erase something, the more people want to see it. And then came the freeze frames. You know the ones, the still images plastered across thumbnails and reaction videos. Meghan's face mid-blink, lips slightly parted, eyes glancing away. 1,000 amateur detectives pored over it like a crime scene photo. "That's the look of fear," said one self-proclaimed body language expert on YouTube. She wasn't expecting that question. "That's the look of someone hiding something." Is that fair? Maybe not. But perception, in media, is everything. And in that instant, perception turned against her. What made this moment even more remarkable was who asked the question. Because Eugenie wasn't just some distant royal cousin. She was, for years, one of Harry and Meghan's closest allies. The one who understood their struggles, who visited them in the US, who stood by them when other royals kept their distance. So, why did she ask that question? Why there? Why then? And why in that way? Maybe it really was innocent. A slip of the tongue. Or maybe, just maybe, it wasn't. Let's rewind again. Before that interview, whispers were already circulating in royal circles. The lack of verified images of Lilibet Diana had become a quiet point of curiosity. Even within the family, few had reportedly met her. Photos exchanged privately were said to be selective and limited. And while official statements claimed the Queen had met her great-granddaughter, no official photo ever surfaced. That absence gnawed at the public imagination. Royal births are, by tradition, public celebrations. The world remembers Diana stepping out of the hospital with baby William. Kate, glowing in her red dress, presenting baby George. But Meghan's daughter? No such moment. Only a carefully worded press release, followed by months of silence. Which brings us back to Eugenie's question. When will we get to meet her properly? It wasn't just a cousin's curiosity. It was the voice of everyone who'd noticed the silence. And Meghan knew it. In the hours after the show, Meghan's team reportedly scrambled. Calls to the producers, requests to edit or temporarily pull the segment. One insider claimed she felt ambushed. Another said she didn't want that clip circulating without context. But in the digital age, context doesn't matter. The moment did. And that's the danger of live television. You can't rewrite what the world has already seen. Online, theories multiplied. Some viewers said Eugenie had been set up by the hosts. Others believed she did it intentionally, perhaps out of frustration, perhaps to send a signal to the palace. But then, a third theory emerged, the one that stuck. What if Eugenie's question wasn't for the audience, but for Meghan herself? Think about it. Two women who were once close, now distant. One still inside the royal system, the other outside, but both bound by the same unspoken knowledge of what really happens behind palace walls. Maybe that question wasn't about Lilibet at all. Maybe it was about truth. About what Meghan had claimed versus what others suspected. Because even family, especially royal family, can doubt one another. And that doubt, when voiced publicly, is dynamite. Still, let's pause here. Could this all just be overblown speculation? Maybe. But then came something no one expected. Within 24 hours, a reporter from a mid-tier London tabloid claimed that multiple palace aides had been caught off guard by Eugenie's remark, that they were concerned about what she might have been implying. The article was buried within a day, replaced by lighter coverage. But screenshots spread online like wildfire. If the palace was nervous, people asked, what did they know? In California, Meghan reportedly went quiet for days. No public sightings. No social media posts. The calm before the storm. Because the Sussex's strategy has always been predictable. Control the narrative or drown it out. Yet this time, they seemed paralyzed. The silence only deepened suspicion. And when silence meets speculation, speculation wins. Meanwhile, Eugenie carried on as if nothing had happened. No clarifications, no apologies. Her social media posts were cheerful, full of family outings and sunny walks. But to those paying attention, the timing was eerie. She looked calm, too calm. Which raises another question. Did she know what she'd done? Because that's the chilling part. Some insiders whispered that Eugenie had grown uncomfortable with the Sussex brand, that she felt misled after their big interviews and streaming projects. And that maybe, just maybe, her question wasn't so innocent after all. Meghan's inner circle, on the other hand, was said to be furious. One unnamed friend described it as a betrayal. But in the royal ecosystem, betrayal and publicity are often the same thing. The more you try to silence a rumor, the louder it becomes. And in this case, the volume only grew. Podcasts began discussing it. Late-night hosts made jokes. A few mainstream outlets tried to dismiss the story, baseless online speculation, but the damage was done. The narrative was out of control. The irony? For years, Meghan had been the master of media manipulation. The woman who turned royal chaos into a global brand. The one who outmaneuvered tabloids, repositioned herself as a modern icon, and built an empire on controlling her image. Yet here she was, undone by one unplanned question. And that's what makes this story so fascinating. It wasn't a scandal exposed by investigative journalists or palace insiders. It was a moment of human imperfection, a genuine reaction, a split second of panic, magnified by millions of eyes. A slip in the mask. That's all it takes in the royal world. Because when your power is built on perception, even a flicker of doubt can become your downfall. Still, the most shocking part hadn't even happened yet. Because while Meghan was scrambling to control the fallout, someone inside the palace was quietly gathering information. Call logs, emails, internal notes. Not for revenge, at least not yet, but for leverage. Because in the House of Windsor, knowledge is currency. And the moment Eugenie's question went viral, everyone started protecting themselves. That's when things got messy. A journalist in London suddenly received an anonymous tip about inconsistencies in the Sussex birth timeline. A photo agency quietly withdrew an image from its public archive. A royal watcher discovered a previously unknown edit in a BBC announcement video about Lilibet's birth. Coincidence? Maybe. But the timing was too perfect. And behind the scenes, alliances began to shift. Eugenie, still outwardly loyal, reportedly received a subtle warning from palace aides to tread carefully. Meghan's PR team went into crisis mode. Harry, caught between family and wife, was said to be furious, not at Eugenie, but at the press for amplifying her words. But that fury came too late, because the story wasn't just trending, it was evolving. What began as a question about a baby had become a question about truth, image, and the fragile line between privacy and deception. And the more Meghan tried to suppress it, the more people dug in. Her silence became an answer in itself. So, was this the beginning of her unraveling? Or the moment she'd fight back harder than ever? They cut to commercial too fast. That was the first clue. In television, timing is everything. And that abrupt fade out after Eugenie's question wasn't normal. The host's forced chuckle, the split second of static before the ad jingle rolled. It all screamed one thing. Someone panicked. Someone hit the button early. But who? And why? That's what people started asking in the hours after the broadcast. On social media, threads exploded. Did they just cut Meghan off mid-answer? Was that planned? Why did the camera angle suddenly change? Small details that most viewers would miss became the focus of global scrutiny. The internet had turned into a forensic lab, dissecting every frame. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Meghan Markle's PR team was scrambling behind the scenes, desperately trying to control what they knew could spiral out of control. Let's go there, behind the broadcast. Because what happened off camera might be even more revealing than what the world saw. Inside the control room, according to an anonymous staffer later quoted in a blog that mysteriously disappeared 2 days after it was posted, chaos broke out the moment Eugenie asked her question. Producers were waving their arms. The director, watching Meghan's face on a monitor, reportedly muttered one word under his breath: cut. But the show couldn't just cut to black. It had sponsors, contracts, segments lined up. So, they did the next best thing: roll to an ad break. Fast. That's when the phone call started. While the commercials played, Meghan's publicist, who had been monitoring the broadcast live from Los Angeles, was already on the line with one of the producers. Witnesses later claimed her voice was sharp, urgent, and controlled. She wasn't shouting. She didn't have to. People who work in television know the tone that really scares you isn't loud, it's quiet. Remove that clip, she allegedly said. We'll follow up with legal. The producer, caught between panic and confusion, tried to explain that it was live television. The footage was already out there. But that didn't matter. In Meghan's world, perception always matters more than facts. And perception was turning. Fast. Back in the studio, during the break, Eugenie reportedly looked uneasy. One makeup artist claimed she muttered something like, "Was that too much?" The host smiled tightly, trying to keep things light, but everyone in that room knew they'd just witnessed something bigger than a simple, awkward question. They came back from commercial pretending nothing had happened. The conversation shifted to royal charities, family holidays, neutral ground. But if you watched closely, the energy was gone. Meghan's laugh was thinner. Eugenie's eyes kept darting off camera. The host overcompensated with fake enthusiasm. The chemistry had cracked. After the show wrapped, staff noticed how quickly Meghan's team reached out to the network's PR department. Officially, it was to coordinate messaging in case tabloids twisted the story. Unofficially, it was about damage control. Because Meghan knew exactly what that moment looked like and how fast it would spread. She'd built her brand on poise, control, the calm in the storm. But on live television, you can't edit fear. You can't Photoshop instinct. And that, more than anything, terrified her. By late afternoon, snippets of the broadcast were circulating on social media. The hashtag was gaining traction. But then, something strange happened. The original video on the network's YouTube channel vanished. Poof, gone. The official reason? Licensing issues. Viewers weren't buying it. Comments flooded the channel's page. Censorship. What are they hiding? If it's innocent, why delete it? Every deletion became proof of guilt. Every silence became fuel. Meanwhile, back in Montecito, Meghan's crisis team went into what insiders call containment mode. They didn't deny anything directly that would draw attention. Instead, they flooded the news cycle with noise. A new charity initiative, a glowing lifestyle piece, a carefully timed leak about a private family moment. Classic distraction strategy. But the internet didn't move on. Because this wasn't a random rumor from a tabloid. It was a video people had seen. A reaction they couldn't unsee. And every time someone tried to erase it, more copies popped up. Mirror uploads. Subtitles in different languages. The digital Hydra effect. Cut off one head, 3 more appear. So why did Meghan's team fight so hard to bury it? Was it just vanity, protecting her image from an awkward on-air moment? Or was there something deeper? Something she didn't want anyone to dig into? One source close to the production later claimed Meghan's representative had demanded all raw footage from the interview be reviewed and cleared for misrepresentation. The network refused. They didn't know her that. This wasn't a Sussex production. This was live British television. But that refusal changed everything. Because now it wasn't just a PR issue. It was a standoff. And standoffs with Meghan Markle never stay quiet for long. By the next morning, the tabloids had caught wind of the behind-the-scenes chaos. A headline in one London paper read, "Tense moments off camera after Eugenie's question." The article didn't accuse anyone directly, but it hinted. Sources described confusion and discomfort following the Duchess's reaction. Meghan's camp fired back privately. They warned journalists not to print unverified claims. But the warning had the opposite effect. It told everyone there was something worth verifying. Let's pause here for a second. You might wonder, how does a single awkward moment on TV turn into a full-blown media war? The answer is simple. Because in the world of royalty, small cracks reveal big truths. And this one cracked wide open. Behind the scenes, even people close to Eugenie were whispering. Some said she felt bad. Others said she didn't regret a thing. But one thing was clear, Meghan felt cornered. For years, she'd maintained a delicate balance. Distant from the royal family, but still tethered to their mystique. She was royal enough to command attention, but rebellious enough to attract sympathy. That balance depended on control. And suddenly, she'd lost it. When you lose control of your narrative, your only option is to rewrite it. And Meghan's team got to work. Within days, several friendly journalists started publishing think pieces about privacy, motherhood, and the pressures of fame. Each article followed the same subtle pattern, acknowledging the viral clip but framing Meghan as the victim of online bullying and misinterpretation. It worked for a few days. Public sympathy rose. The focus shifted back to the toxicity of social media. But under the surface, the damage was irreversible. Because once people doubt your authenticity, every word afterward feels rehearsed. And the doubt was spreading. Producers from the network began whispering to journalists off the record. Little things. A nervous laugh here, a quiet correction there. Enough to keep the story alive. One claimed that after the broadcast, Meghan's assistant requested the show's full runtime logs, timestamps, transcript drafts, even lighting settings. Why? No one knew. But when someone asks for every second of a recording, it usually means they're searching for something or deleting it. The next twist came a week later. The network's editor responsible for digital uploads abruptly went on leave. No explanation given. His departure fueled even more speculation online. Was he forced out? Did he refuse to delete the footage? By then, the story had mutated. It wasn't just about Lilibet anymore. It was about power, about control, about a woman known for crafting her image now fighting to erase a few seconds of truth. And through it all, Princess Eugenie remained silent. Not a word, not a post, not even a like. Silence, the loudest move she could make. But silence cuts both ways. Because Meghan's silence felt defensive, Eugenie's felt deliberate, calculated, almost like she was waiting. Waiting for what? Some said the palace was assessing the situation. Others believed Harry was mediating privately, begging Eugenie not to make things worse. Whatever the truth, there was one undeniable fact. The family's internal rift had deepened. Every leak, every anonymous source, every whisper, it all pointed to one thing. Trust was gone. And when trust dies inside the royal circle, secrets start to slip through the cracks. That's when the real story began to shift. While the media obsessed over Meghan's panic, a small group of royal reporters started re-examining older inconsistencies, birth records, travel timelines, unexplained photo releases. The moment Eugenie asked that question, they realized had reopened a door that Meghan and Harry thought they'd closed years ago. The question wasn't just embarrassing. It was catalytic, because it reminded everyone of what they didn't know. Who was present when Lilibet was born? Why were official documents delayed? Why were there conflicting details between US and UK sources? Each question led to another, and each answer led back to one moment, the missing photograph. But we'll get to that soon. For now, imagine Meghan pacing in her Montecito home, her team around her, laptops open, emails flying. Her brand built on perfection suddenly looked fragile. She wasn't just fighting a rumor, she was fighting erosion. And erosion happened slowly, then all at once. That's when she made the call. Not to a lawyer, not to a journalist, but to someone who specialized in something far more subtle, narrative rehabilitation. An expert in rewriting perception. Their job? Not to make the story disappear, but to drown it in other stories. And it worked for a while. The media's attention drifted to other royal dramas. Another scandal, another distraction. But in the corners of the internet, the clip kept resurfacing. Viewers kept asking the same question. Why did Meghan look so afraid? And if that question haunted her, there was one that haunted the palace even more. What if Eugenie hadn't slipped up, but signaled something the rest of them already knew? It started quietly, a murmur here, a cryptic text there. At first, it sounded like the usual royal gossip. But soon, it became something else. Something darker. Within days of the broadcast, a web of whispers began to spread through palace circles, media backchannels, and even within Meghan and Harry's former staff. People weren't just asking why Princess Eugenie asked that question. They were asking who told her to. Because in the world of royalty, nothing happens by accident. Every smile, every statement, every spontaneous gesture, it's all orchestrated. And if Eugenie broke the script that day, someone had loosened the strings. But who would risk it? And why now? Let's rewind for a second. Eugenie wasn't just any royal. She wasn't a rebel like Harry, nor a cold traditionalist like some of the senior royals. She'd always floated somewhere in between, friendly with Meghan and Harry at first, but still loyal to the crown. That balance made her dangerous. She could move between worlds without suspicion, which is why her question, that one loaded sentence, felt like a message, not just to Meghan, to everyone watching. The first whispers came from a source inside a British news agency. They claimed that, in the week leading up to the broadcast, Eugenie had received a private briefing. Not from the palace directly, but from someone close to it. A quiet dinner. A few too many glasses of wine. A remark that certain discrepancies about Lilibet's birth certificate were under review. No one said what those discrepancies were. But apparently, it was enough to plant a seed. And when the cameras rolled, that seed sprouted into a live question. Now, here's where it gets even stranger. A few royal aides, speaking anonymously, said that the palace had been expecting something to happen, not necessarily on TV, but soon. Because behind the scenes, the Queen's legal advisors had been quietly investigating paperwork related to the line of succession. Nothing dramatic, just routine verification, they claimed. But the timing was suspicious. This review reportedly began just weeks after Harry and Meghan announced they wouldn't attend a major royal event in London. At the time, their absence was blamed on security concerns. But those who know how royal bureaucracy works said that's when internal questions about Lilibet's official status started to bubble up again. Think about that. Why would a child's legitimacy in the line of succession be under review years after her birth? Why then? It wasn't about gossip. It was about protocol. Because every heir, even a distant one, has to meet specific criteria to remain in line. Documentation, witnesses, certification, all part of the royal rulebook. And something, apparently, didn't match. That's when the Whisper network kicked into gear. Insiders started trading clues, screenshots, half-sentences, the kind of leaks that never show up in official reports but always seem to reach journalists off the record. And all roads pointed back to one person, Meghan's former aide, who had quietly resigned 2 years earlier. Her name kept coming up, always with the same phrase, "She knows too much." This aide had been there during some of Meghan's most secretive moments, from her pregnancy announcements to her media dealings. She knew who signed what, who sent which emails, who took which photos. And apparently, she was furious about how things ended. Rumor had it she'd been approached by a publisher. And that's where things really began to spiral. Because the thought of a former staffer writing a tell-all about the Sussexes' private dealings terrified Meghan's team, especially when they heard that one of the proposed chapters had a working title. The Birth That Changed Everything. The timing of Eugenie's question, the rumors of a brewing tell-all, the palace's paperwork review, it all started to look less like coincidence and more like coordination. And Meghan? She could feel it closing in. Her world runs on optics, and optics are fragile. One wrong headline, one hint of scandal, and the brand she'd built could crumble. So she did what she always does when cornered. She went silent publicly, but active privately. Calls, texts, quiet favors. Damage control disguised as casual conversation. But silence breeds speculation. And the more she said nothing, the louder the whispers became. Meanwhile, Princess Eugenie had vanished from public life for a few weeks, officially, for family time. Unofficially, some said she was being told to lay low. Others believed she was being protected. Because if she'd asked that question intentionally, she might have opened a door that even the palace wasn't ready to walk through. Let's be clear about something here. The royal family has faced its share of scandals, affairs, divorces, lawsuits, you name it. But questions about lineage? That's a different beast entirely. That's constitutional. That's existential. And that's exactly why this Whisper network was so dangerous. The press couldn't print it. Not yet. The legal risk was too high. But journalists could hint. And hint they did. A few tabloids began running oddly vague stories about clarifications in the line of succession. Others mentioned anxieties about documentation and privacy agreements. Most readers skipped those paragraphs. But for those paying attention, the subtext was unmistakable. And then came the leak. Late one night, a file surfaced on a small gossip forum, a supposed copy of a draft statement that the Sussex team had allegedly prepared months earlier concerning discrepancies in reporting about Lilibet's early months. The file disappeared within hours, but not before screenshots spread across social media. The language in that statement was careful, too careful. It never denied anything directly. Instead, it emphasized privacy, protecting the well-being of our children, and respecting personal family matters. Sound familiar? It should. That's the same phrasing Meghan's PR team always used when dodging specific questions. So the internet did what it does best. It filled in the blanks. Speculation became certainty. Certainty became outrage. And suddenly, what began as a single awkward moment on live television had morphed into a full-blown digital witch hunt. But amid all the chaos, one detail went unnoticed until now. 3 days after that leak, Meghan's former aide deleted every trace of her online presence. Instagram, LinkedIn, even her public charity affiliations, gone. Vanished. That's not a coincidence. That's retreat. And people who retreat that suddenly usually do so for one of two reasons: fear or negotiation. Which one was it? Some say she'd been offered a settlement. Others whisper she'd been warned. Either way, the timing was too precise to ignore. And here's where things take a sharp turn. Because just as the whispers about Meghan's aide were hitting their peak, someone unexpected stepped into the story. A man, not a royal, not a journalist, a photographer. He'd been part of the pool assigned to cover Meghan's first pregnancy years earlier. He claimed to have unreleased archival material from that period. Photographs the public never saw, and more importantly, timestamps that didn't match the official narrative. When asked why he hadn't released them sooner, his answer was chillingly simple. Because I was told not to. That one line sent shockwaves through the online community. If his story was true, it meant the inconsistencies weren't accidental. They were managed, controlled. And if that's the case, then Eugenie's question wasn't an innocent slip, it was an exposure. A fracture in a carefully constructed story. By this point, the palace had gone completely silent. Not even sources close to anyone were speaking. And that kind of silence, in the royal world, doesn't mean nothing's happening. It means lawyers are working overtime. Inside Montecito, Meghan's team reportedly held back-to-back crisis calls. The instruction was simple: lock everything down. No comments. No clarifications. No statements. Every inquiry was to be met with one phrase: we do not comment on speculative or private matters. But behind that cold PR wall, panic was setting in. Because this wasn't just about Lilibet anymore. It was about credibility. When your entire public image is built on authenticity, the slightest hint of deceit can destroy it. And Meghan knew, perception is everything. Once the audience doubts your truth, every smile, every speech, every tear looks staged. And in the court of public opinion, perception is the only verdict that matters. Still, the real bombshell was yet to come. Because while Meghan's team was busy fighting fires online, one of the people closest to Eugenie was about to break the unspoken rule of royal life. Never speak about family business to outsiders. And when they did, the secret they hinted at would flip the story upside down and leave even Meghan's most loyal defenders speechless. It happened quietly. No press conference, no statement, not even a tweet. Just a brief, casual conversation that was never meant to be public. But once it leaked, there was no going back. The source was a friend. Not a palace insider, not a staffer, but someone close enough to Princess Eugenie to know when she was nervous and when she wasn't. They didn't go to the media directly. They spoke to someone who did. It began as gossip over dinner, a seemingly offhand remark that found its way to the wrong set of ears. A journalist for a mid-tier British outlet overheard it, or rather, was told to overhear it. Because nothing about this leak felt accidental. According to this friend, Eugenie hadn't just slipped up on live television. She'd been sitting with something for weeks. Something she couldn't shake. Something she'd been told, not by rumor, not by tabloids, but by someone inside the royal system itself. The friend claimed Eugenie had received what was described as a distressing clarification regarding royal documentation. Specifically, an internal update that mentioned delays in verification related to Lilibet Diana's official birth registration. Now, to most people, that wouldn't mean much. Bureaucracy, paperwork. But to the royals, that's constitutional gold dust. Every name, every date, every signature, all must align perfectly. Because one discrepancy, no matter how small, can change everything. And Eugenie, who's always been known for her emotional honesty, reportedly couldn't keep it bottled up. The friend said she'd even rehearsed not saying anything before the broadcast. But when Meghan started talking about family unity, about honesty and healing, something in her cracked. The question slipped out. How's little Lilibet doing these days? On the surface, innocent. But everyone who knew the backstory heard the weight behind it. And that's what made it dangerous. When the journalist first received this story, they didn't believe it. It sounded too explosive, too implausible. But they decided to test it. They contacted 2 palace correspondents, off the record, and simply asked whether there was anything interesting about royal birth documentation lately. The responses were almost identical. Long pause. Nervous laugh. Then, you didn't hear that from me. That's when the journalist realized they'd stumbled into something massive. But before they could publish, the pressure started. Emails, phone calls, anonymous legal warnings. The kind of pushback that doesn't happen unless someone really doesn't want you to print. And here's where things get really odd. Instead of killing the story, the journalists did something bold. They leaked it sideways. Not as an article, but as a whisper to an American gossip vlogger. Someone with no ties to the British press, no fear of royal legal threats, and an audience that lived for scandal. Within 24 hours, that vlogger uploaded a 12-minute video titled Royal Birth Records Bombshell. The video never used names. It spoke in riddles: a certain duchess, a certain princess, a certain child whose name begins with L. But everyone knew exactly who it meant. The algorithm did the rest. Within hours, the video hit 1 million views. Within days, 10 million. Theories exploded. People dissected every frame of Meghan and Harry's past interviews, searching for inconsistencies. Every timeline, every date, every photo was reanalyzed. And through it all, Eugenie remained silent. Her silence spoke louder than any denial. Meanwhile, the palace PR team faced an impossible decision: to address the rumors or ignore them. Addressing meant legitimizing. Ignoring meant letting them grow. And so, they chose the royal family's oldest weapon: quiet endurance. But Meghan? She didn't do quiet. Sources claim that after the vlogger's video went viral, Meghan's U.S. attorneys sent multiple cease and desist letters to gossip sites. But in doing so, they made a critical mistake. They confirmed what the video was about: the Streisand effect. By trying to suppress it, they made it explode. Suddenly, American talk shows were hinting at new royal mysteries. TikTok was filled with royal truth threads. Even late-night comedians started joking about the Phantom Princess. That's when Harry stepped in. According to insiders, he was furious, not at Eugenie, but at the situation spiraling out of control. He wanted to issue a statement, something simple and direct to shut it down. But Meghan's team disagreed. They argued that responding would reopen wounds and feed conspiracy culture. Harry reluctantly agreed, but friends say the silence ate at him. Because for once, the chaos wasn't just attacking Meghan, it was targeting his daughter. And Harry, for all his mistakes, has always been fiercely protective of his children. So, while Meghan's team focused on controlling headlines, Harry began calling in favors of his own. Old military contacts, journalists he trusted, even 1 or 2 people still loyal inside the palace. He wanted answers. What he found shocked him. One of the people he reached out to hinted that the palace review Eugenie had been told about was real, that someone had been quietly rechecking the legalities of the succession list, that certain signatures related to Lilibet's official documentation had taken longer than usual to verify due to cross-jurisdictional complexities. That's diplomatic code for something didn't line up. Harry reportedly confronted palace officials directly. The response he got was bureaucratic, rehearsed, and maddeningly vague. Standard protocol. Administrative review. Nothing of concern. But Harry wasn't convinced. He started noticing small changes: calls not returned, messages left unread. The same friends who used to pick up suddenly couldn't talk. People were closing ranks. Meanwhile, Meghan was growing more paranoid by the day. The idea that someone inside the royal system was feeding information to her cousin-in-law terrified her. Every glance, every text, every unreturned call, she started wondering who could be trusted. And in the middle of it all, Eugenie disappeared again. Not literally, but socially. She stopped appearing at public events, stopped posting on Instagram, even missed a few family gatherings. The palace said it was a private break, but others whispered she'd been asked, or ordered, to step back. That was when the friend spoke again. This time, not privately. A cryptic post appeared on social media, quickly deleted, but not before screenshots spread. It read, "Sometimes truth slips out by accident. Sometimes it's pushed out on purpose." No name, no context, but royal watchers recognized the writing style immediately. It matched Eugenie's circle. The internet lit up. What truth? Who pushed it? What did she mean? And that's when the final, devastating detail of the friend's earlier leak came to light. Apparently, during that same dinner conversation, Eugenie had confessed something even she didn't fully believe: that there was a rumor, unconfirmed, unproven, but persistent, that the palace had once questioned whether certain records tied to Lilibet's early months had been reconstructed. Reconstructed. That was the word. Not falsified. Not fabricated. Reconstructed. As if something had been redone, replaced, or fixed. The journalist who heard it didn't dare print it. Not without hard proof. But by then, it didn't matter. The idea was out there, whispered, repeated, reshared thousands of times. And for Meghan, perception was reality. Every click, every comment, every video became another cut to her credibility. The same woman who once commanded the global stage now looked defensive, reactive, desperate. Her enemies didn't have to prove anything. They just had to keep her on the defensive. And that's exactly where she stayed, until one unexpected figure from her own past decided to step forward. Someone who once worked for her. Someone who'd stayed silent through every scandal, every backlash. But not anymore. It was the kind of call that sends a chill down your spine. No warning, no preamble, just a voice. Calm, measured, but carrying the weight of knowledge that could topple reputations. Duchess Marinvale's team had been bracing for weeks. After Princess Alara Windsor's infamous live television question, the one about Marin's daughter, little Leora, the tension had been simmering. Rumors, leaks, whispers, all manageable, except for one thing, the unknown insider. And now, that unknown insider had reached out. The first thing Marin noticed was the voice itself. Neither youthful nor old, just seasoned, deliberate, someone who had seen every side of royal power. "I know what you're worried about," the person said. "I know what you're trying to control." Marin's PR lead froze. Usually, she'd have a script ready. Legal language, talking points, a denial. But this voice? It didn't negotiate. It exposed. "I have information," the insider continued. "Information you might not want in public, but the world is already talking." Marin didn't respond. She simply listened. The insider described events that had never been public. Documents, meetings, private discussions, subtle discrepancies in schedules, and even a few misaligned official announcements, all surrounding Leora's early months. Not just facts, but the way those facts had been managed, curated, and sometimes quietly erased. The language was careful, almost surgical. The insider never accused anyone of wrongdoing directly. They simply presented context. The processes, the timelines, the decisions that had been made behind closed doors. Every word felt loaded. Every pause carried consequence. "They're already questioning things," the insider said, almost whispering. "They've been questioning for months. That's why Princess Alara asked what she did. She didn't just stumble. She was responding to a system that's already unstable." The call ended as abruptly as it began. No threats, no demands, just knowledge. And that knowledge was explosive. Marin's team immediately went into overdrive. Emails flew. Calls were made. Analysts scoured old press releases and archived footage, comparing every detail to find the inconsistencies hinted at by the insider. But there was a problem. The more they investigated, the more the story grew. Because inconsistencies aren't mistakes, they're patterns. And patterns tell a story far more dangerous than any single headline. Overnight, the team realized that Princess Alara's live question had been a spark in a powder keg. Not just about Leora's private life, but about control, about perception, about power. And now, the insider had handed them the match. By morning, social media had already begun to react. Hashtags referring to the hidden princess and royal discrepancies had gone viral, each post more speculative than the last. A few smaller outlets had begun piecing together a timeline, pointing out subtle gaps between public appearances, press releases, and official announcements. Marin's PR director held an emergency meeting. "This isn't just damage control anymore," she said, pacing. "It's about narrative reconstruction. We don't just spin the story, we reshape it." But even with all the planning, no one could predict the wildfire about to erupt. Because the insider had one more revelation, something they hadn't shared in the first call. Something that went beyond documents, schedules, and official announcements. "They're watching," the voice said. "The palace and beyond. Anyone who's paying attention knows something isn't right. And now they're looking for proof." Marin's team felt the weight of that statement immediately. In the royal world, proof doesn't mean legal evidence alone. It means photographs, recordings, documents, public admissions. Anything tangible that supports speculation. And proof, once discovered, cannot be contained. Meanwhile, Princess Alara, oblivious to the insider's intervention, had already begun her own rounds. Public appearances, small interviews, photo ops, all meticulously staged to appear casual, genuine, harmless. But the live clip of her question was still circulating. Every gesture she made, every smile, every laugh was scrutinized frame by frame. Every detail was analyzed for hidden meaning, and some of it wasn't flattering. The internet, as it always does, created narratives faster than Meghan's team could destroy them. Clips were slowed down. Zoom-ins magnified expressions. Side-by-side comparisons. Her daughter's first public appearance versus official photographs from the palace archives became overnight content fodder. Meghan Vale, for all her calm, suddenly felt exposed in ways she had never experienced. She had mastered media manipulation, yes, but this was a new frontier, one where whispers, speculation, and the tiniest hints of inconsistency could metastasize into global obsession. And now, the insider had made it worse. By the following day, articles began appearing with subtle but pointed headlines. Questions surround early months of royal child, mystery of the hidden heiress. Princess Eugenia's curious question sparks speculation. Each one followed a familiar pattern. No accusations, but enough context, enough implication to ignite the public imagination. Enough to raise doubts in the mind of every casual viewer. For Meghan, the stakes were personal. Not just her image, but her daughter's life. Every leak, every viral clip, every speculative tweet was another step toward public scrutiny of someone who had never asked for fame. And that's when another complication emerged. A photographer, an old royal pool photographer with decades of experience, contacted the vlogger who had first discussed the live question. He claimed to have archival material that had never been released. Images, recordings, even private footage from key events in Leora's first year, all carefully timed, all carefully controlled. People think they've seen everything, he said. But the truth, the real details, they're buried. And with that statement, the story took on a new dimension. It was no longer speculation. It was a treasure hunt. And the treasure was evidence. The vlogger uploaded a cryptic teaser. No footage yet, just hints. But the audience went wild. The teaser went viral, tens of millions of views in hours. The message was clear, more secrets were coming. Meghan's team went into panic mode. Lawyers, PR, security, everyone mobilized. Emergency briefings, media audits, and a whirlwind of internal memos followed. But nothing could stop the wave that had been set in motion. Because once an insider speaks, once evidence leaks, once public curiosity takes hold, control is almost impossible to regain. By the end of the week, hashtags about the hidden heiress were trending globally. Clips of Princess Eugenia's live question were still circulating. The so-called Whisper Network had grown. And everyone, Meghan, her team, even the palace equivalents in Arendelle, knew it. The narrative had shifted. It wasn't just about perception anymore. It was about truth, or at least what the world believed to be truth. And somewhere in Montecito, Meghan Vale sat quietly in her study, watching it all unfold. The insider had vanished after the call, but the ripple they created could not be contained. Every strategic move she had made, every press release carefully orchestrated, now felt like a fragile dam holding back a flood. One wrong step, one misstatement, one overlooked detail, and the narrative could collapse entirely. The stakes weren't just reputational. They were personal, constitutional, and, most importantly, irreversible once they hit the public. And Meghan knew it, because the insider's final words still echoed in her mind. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed, and this one is already wide open. But when the information was fed into the crisis team's system, the discrepancies multiplied. One photo taken in Montecito was labeled as though it were from a European event. A press release about a charitable appearance didn't match the location of the published images. It didn't take long for patterns to emerge. Certain weeks had virtually no verified documentation, yet press releases implied that Leora had been present at official events. It was as if someone had stitched together a timeline, filling in the gaps with narrative rather than reality. Meghan's team realized immediately that this was dangerous. Not only did the inconsistencies raise questions for the public, but they provided ammunition to anyone willing to dig deeper: bloggers, investigative journalists, even fictional exposé creators online. The second anomaly was subtler, almost invisible unless one knew exactly what to look for: conflicting details in speeches and interviews. In one early statement, Meghan mentioned that Leora had first attended a private family ceremony at 3 months old. But a photograph in the same period suggested she had been at a different event entirely. Small, almost imperceptible discrepancies, yet they hinted at a carefully managed story. And then came the emails. Late one night, the crisis team intercepted what appeared to be an internal memo between Meghan's former aides and the network responsible for covering her public appearances. It was unsigned, but analysts believed it had originated from someone deeply embedded in her early media team. The memo suggested adjustments to public-facing timelines, language, and appearances, essentially coordinating events to reinforce the curated narrative. For Meghan, the discovery was chilling. Everything she had built on control, poise, and precision was now exposed as negotiable. Every press appearance, every spontaneous photo, every heartfelt speech could be questioned. The meticulously constructed timeline was unraveling, and with it, the narrative she had worked tirelessly to maintain. The unraveling timeline didn't stop there. Legal documents began surfacing in digital archives, seemingly routine contracts, yet containing subtle references to dates and events that contradicted earlier public statements. One particular document, a notarized affidavit relating to a foundation event in Leora's first year, implied she had been in two places at once. It was the kind of detail that could make public perception shift in an instant. By the next morning, social media had already latched onto the anomalies. Bloggers and amateur sleuths began comparing photographs, press statements, and interviews. Conspiracy theories started to surface. Was Leora's timeline being intentionally misrepresented? Was someone controlling the narrative behind the scenes? And if so, why? Meghan Vale watched it unfold with a mix of disbelief and dread. She had always understood the power of media, the way a well-timed release could shape public perception. But she had never faced a situation like this, where the very timeline she had orchestrated was being dissected, pixel by pixel, by an audience hungry for inconsistencies. Meanwhile, Princess Eugenie Windsor, seemingly oblivious to the storm, continued her carefully staged public appearances. But the live clip of her original question, the one about Leora, remained a focal point for the public imagination. Analysts noted that each new revelation about the timeline only strengthened the significance of that single moment. The insider who had broken the silence earlier reemerged, feeding additional context to select journalists. They described minor but consequential events that, when placed within the newly discovered timeline anomalies, suggested that Leora's early life had been far more controlled and curated than previously believed. Every action, every public appearance, seemed orchestrated to reinforce a story rather than reflect reality. By midweek, the situation escalated. International outlets picked up the story, cautiously framing it as an intriguing investigation into the management of a high-profile family. The narrative was careful, nuanced, yet undeniably fueled by the discrepancies in the timeline. Even without explicitly naming Meghan Vale or Princess Eugenie, the public immediately connected the dots. Meghan's team worked tirelessly to counteract the narrative. Emergency meetings, PR strategies, and legal reviews took over every hour of the day. Analysts mapped social media trends, monitored the spread of videos, and coordinated with allies in the press to manage the message. But for every piece of controlled content released, another anomaly emerged, another contradiction was highlighted, and another viewer began questioning the official story. Amid this chaos, one particularly damning discovery came from a small, independent archivist who had been tracking royal events for years. They noticed that several events, previously described in press releases, lacked photographic or video documentation entirely. In some cases, event locations listed in press materials didn't match records in digital archives. The implications were staggering. If the curated timeline was based on events that hadn't happened as reported, what else could be questioned? How deep did the discrepancies run? This created a feedback loop of suspicion. The more Meghan's team tried to reinforce control, the more anomalies were discovered. Every correction, clarification, or denial inadvertently fueled public curiosity and scrutiny. Analysts coined a term for it, the timeline cascade effect. Once one inconsistency was identified, it became a trigger for viewers to investigate further, uncovering more contradictions and reinforcing the perception of a carefully manipulated story. Meanwhile, the insider continued to feed selective information. Some of it was mundane, event scheduling, minor editorial changes. But other details were more explosive: handwritten notes, internal memos, and communications that suggested active management of public perception regarding Leora. Even the smallest hints, a corrected date, a minor discrepancy between a press release and a photograph, took on outsized significance. The audience, already primed by Princess Alera's live question, interpreted these anomalies as evidence of a carefully hidden truth. By the weekend, what began as a minor viral moment had exploded into a full-scale public investigation. Social media forums were dissecting timelines, debating the authenticity of photographs, and piecing together the sequence of events. Memes, videos, and threads created their own narratives, each more elaborate and speculative than the last. Marin Vale, now isolated in her Montecito residence, realized a fundamental truth. The battle was no longer about managing appearances. It was about reclaiming the timeline itself. Every correction, every clarification, every narrative intervention had to be meticulously calibrated to prevent further damage. But the more she attempted to control the story, the more evidence emerged that suggested she had lost control entirely. Every digital trail, every archived photo, every independently verified document contributed to the perception that her curated narrative was unraveling. And yet, as the crisis reached its peak, the biggest revelation was still to come. Because amid all the chaos, a single photograph surfaced that didn't just challenge the timeline. It threatened to rewrite the entire narrative. A single image, captured years earlier but never released publicly, showed details that directly contradicted key elements of the official record. Analysts who examined it in detail discovered subtle but undeniable inconsistencies, locations, dates, and even the presence of individuals who were supposedly elsewhere according to press releases. The public reaction was immediate. Social media erupted. Headlines speculated about the authenticity of events, timelines, and public statements. The timeline cascade effect went into overdrive. The single photograph became the focal point of discussion, overshadowing all other content and driving renewed scrutiny toward every public appearance, statement, and documented event. Marin Vale's team understood the stakes. The narrative, meticulously curated over years, was at risk of collapsing entirely. And yet, even in the midst of this unprecedented scrutiny, the insider remained silent, watching from the shadows, letting the story unfold, knowing that once a timeline is questioned, perception becomes reality. And in the midst of it all, one question loomed larger than any other. If the carefully curated timeline could be challenged so publicly, what else had been hidden, edited, or reconstructed? The answer to that question would force Marin, Princess Alera, and everyone involved to confront